Hey, good morning, viewers. And it is a good morning because a number of people have agreed with me and have decided to tell you and the world what they actually did at Cobra Mist and at Industrial Park. Excellent. So today, a bit of an update from things that I've received. Obviously, these people want to be still anonymous. It's still classified, and they're covered by, in Britain, the Official Secrets Act. So the first fascinating message I got, and I'm not saying whether it was via email or social media because it really needs to be secret, and that was from somebody who actually worked at Cobra Mist. Top person. And what they said is really interesting, is two bits of extra information, things that I got slightly wrong, which clarifies some really important points that you need to know. And that is, it actually was an over-the-horizon radar, partially, but it also was an EMP generator. Aha! There's one really obvious thing about the Cobra Mist antenna site, which I've kind of ignored because I assumed that it was designed and built in a way that just fitted onto this bit of land called Orford Ness. And they needed to build the biggest antenna array that they could and orientate it on this piece of coastal land that was available. But no, that's not true. If you look at this overview, you'll notice that it's actually pointing towards the Baltic Sea. It's actually pointing towards Denmark. It's not actually pointing towards Moscow. It's not east. It's very, very much northeast. Cobra Mist's single duty was to look at the Balkans, the Baltic area, because that was of great interest during the Cold War for things in the air. That's the key point. According to this person who worked there, its single role and duty was to eliminate things flying over Finland and the Baltic states heading towards Britain. Missiles, I guess, or aircraft maybe, but things in the air. And it had a Doppler movement detector. And then when things were detected, it could send out a EMP beam or pulse to hopefully knock out something that was up in the air. It was never aimed at the ground. It was specifically designed for aerial targets. Oh, that's really interesting. Although it raises a big issue, is I can't imagine you would use the incredibly sensitive over-the-horizon radar listening capability. At the same time, you would send out this pulse of EMP radiation. I don't know how it would continue to duplex between over-the-horizon and a weapon system. Possibly it was tied into Fylingdales, and there was other radars that could verify whether the pulse was successful. Of course, it was never used in anger, but it was definitely tested. So going with the Balkan story, an EMP denial system specifically for that kind of northeast part of Europe, where the Soviets at the time might have put bad assets in the sky. One of the things that, of course, everybody knows that Cobra Mist didn't work. It was plagued by weird interference. That starts making a lot of sense. Remember, folks, from Suffolk, England, the Baltic states are over the horizon. And the only way to actually send a signal further than you can visually see, because of the curvature of the Earth, is to bounce it off the ionosphere. And that's how OTH radars work, and possibly that's how the pulse was sent. I'm not sure. But in the Soviet Union at the time was a HARP-type facility, like the one that the US have in Alaska. And what the Soviet HARP was probably designed to do was to mess with the ionosphere that Cobra Mist would bounce off. So instead of it being at the layer and the level that they thought it was messed up, it was turbulent, and so they got a very poor return. It was noisy. And there are HARP-type facilities, ionospheric heaters in Russia, that could have done that. So maybe that was the source of the noise. So it's fascinating. The wedge-shaped design of Cobra Mist does reveal that it produced EMP, and it possibly was a radar as well. Maybe listening, and then it could switch over to powering up the massive Marx generators, these supercapacitors that were probably underneath Orphan Nest, and then kaboom, taking out something in the sky, not on the ground. And that makes a lot of sense. I still think it was closed down because it was continually being blocked by the Soviet Union's, the radar part of it, because they knew what it could do if it ever fired a pulse. So they wanted to block the signal of their stuff in the sky. And the American Air Force, who ran it in Britain, on British soil, of course, with the MOD, I think were very honest about why they shut it down. They were having this constant problem of interference from the Ruskies, and RCA, who'd built the filters and the computers to interpret the incredibly weak signal of things that were moving in the sky, just couldn't filter out the noise or couldn't focus the beam accurately enough to actually see anything. They would get a lot of false returns, and that's no good, is it? So in the declassified report, why it was shut down, the Americans just said they had a contract break with RCA. RCA could have upped their game with a new computer system, but there was a break clause in the contract, and they had a choice whether they went ahead and be committed to a whole new generation of computers that might or might not have filtered out the noise, or should they evoke the break clause very, very quickly. That was the problem for the British government, in like a couple of weeks. And that meant it was closed down, but all the British workers, and there was a whole bunch of British workers who were on monthly salaries, would be out of work. And that, of course, triggered a work tribunal. And that's how Cobra Mist got into the public press. I think that's quite likely. The Americans just pulled the money and told the Brits to sort out the problem with the workers. Yep. And of course it worked, so they could use all the data they got from Cobra Mist to build a portable or a containerized system at Martlesham and at Bentwaters using SRI technology. I really now feel, thanks to you and me digging, I suppose, and we know what actually Cobra Mist was. I'm sure there's more to it, but I think fundamentally we haven't got it wrong anymore. It kind of was what they said, and that's really interesting. If you are British, you understand this phrase, and that's economical with the truth. And that's how British government works. That's actually how Brits work. We don't actually say, very often, blatant lies. We tell half-truths. We go, well, it was a bit like that. You know, it's such a British thing. So when they said Cobra Mist was plagued by interference, they were actually right, but they weren't telling the full story. And that leads me on to the next half-truth. And that's what SRI did and what was actually happening at Martlesham Heath. So what is Martlesham Heath? Well, I'm going to be British government and economical with the truth. It was the post office research laboratory where very much the GPO developed fibre optics. Well, it's true. It's actually true. But they're being economical with the truth. And the other thing that I got slightly wrong, I've been calling the Martlesham Heath Laboratory a Adastral House. It's not a Adastral House, because I've now heard from somebody who worked inside the laboratory. It's actually called a Adastral Park, because it's big and had lots of other defence contractors and other things going on there. It was very, very much a intercept. It was a tapping centre. A lot of the fibre optics and other lines went through Suffolk in Martlesham, and it was one of the main government phone tapping centres and a research and development for modern technology. But because it was a park, they had other laboratories, and they have, I think Marconi might have been there, but specifically this person wanted to tell me, because they worked there, what Stanford's research were doing there. It's like, yeah, if we understand what SRI did after Cobra Mist and what they were working on, and now we know they were building something from this person, it's very revealing what actually happened, I think, at Rendlesham Forest. So again, this person is completely anonymous, and I don't ever want to reveal who they might be. But they confirmed that SRI were a major laboratory at Martlesham Heath at Industrial Park. And the Americans, as they were called, or the Yanks, and they would often mix with them in the canteen, were known to everybody who was working on the phone system. And SRI were doing something, and it was highly secret. He was told that if he ever revealed or discussed the Americans, that he, or even going to their area, he would be fired. So it was very, very secret. There's something that SRI were doing which had to be compartmentalized from the Brits who were working on our phone system. Today he would like to share not what they were doing, but how they were doing it, put it like this. He said that for many years they worked on a secret floor which you couldn't really get off in the lift, and that was the Americans. And they ran out of space because they needed a new area to work in. And the British government and Americans built them extremely big, heavy foundation laboratory because they actually opened a manufacturing facility to build military chips. So there was a chip manufacturing facility at Industrial Park run by SRI. They were obviously building a classified system using their own integrated circuit technology to make multiple, because it wasn't a one-off thing. They must have been mass producing some, I guess, weapon system or device. Who knows? I mean, he didn't know, I don't know, but there was actually a manufacturing facility in the UK run by Stanford Research, building chips. And a third and fascinating mystery that still continues, and that is, how would Cobra Mist be both an over-the-horizon radar and an EMP pulse generator? They're two very separate things. And a person who's been working on this project with me thinks it's actually unlikely that it could be both. So maybe Cobra Mist has a sister. That was the idea, that it could transmit, but it would need to receive at a very, very distant and quiet place somewhere else in Britain, Navy assets. I don't know. It's unlikely that you'd send out so much power and be able to hear a return using the same antenna that was sending out so much power. Again, I'm not an antenna person. So he floats the idea that there was Cobra Mist 2, a receiving station for the over-the-horizon signal that bounced back somewhere in the UK. I don't know if it was necessary, but if that's the case, did you work there? Do you know of a Cobra Mist receiving station? That would just be fascinating. So thank you very much. I totally respect your anonymity. You chose your words very carefully. You're not revealing who you are, what you did, and actually secrets. You're just making general comments. So I think that's absolutely valid. And it's really helping everybody now, 50 years after Cobra Mist closed down, understand what it really did. The reason Cobra Mist is so fascinating is that something to do with Cobra Mist and son of Cobra Mist was involved in what happened at the Rendlesham Forest incident, where highly strange UAP were seen in the sky and it actually injured US Air Force service people. We need to unpick that story. I think if you understand Cobra Mist and understand its history, you start to begin to understand what was seen in the sky over Rendlesham Forest. And that's what I'm doing this for, because the truth needs to be out there.